This is hour 4 of our 5-hour live stream celebrating the first anniversary of our work to rid the world of apostasy laws, like the death penalty for changing your mind about God. In this segment, I speak with Apostate Aladdin, who is my favorite ex-Muslim YouTuber. We talk about why criticism gets misrepresented as hate and how terms like Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and even kaffir are often used as tools to shut down honest disagreement. We also dig into the confusion around atheism, the trap of strawmanning, the limitations of debate culture, and what makes a conversation actually worth having. We talk about the problem with starting arguments over definitions, why no reason to leave religion is a bad reason, and how deconversion can leave people vulnerable to new harmful ideologies. We also talked about the phases of faith, especially how many Muslims cling to Islam for morality. We touch on the Israel-Palestine litmus test, the futility of debates that begin with strawmanning, and the importance of setting clear goals in discussions. We also reflect on the Jordan Peterson versus 20 atheists debate and why steelmanning must not turn into mutating someone's view. Watch the rest of this series, sign the manifesto, and get involved. Links are in the description. Let's get into it. Hello, Apostate Aladdin. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How about you?
Good. I was watching one of your videos or whatever, and you say for people to call you Aladdin, not the full name every time, right?
Yeah, Aladdin's fine. I'm not very picky about it. Even apostate is fine.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So how are you doing so far?
Doing well. Yeah. Busy weekend, but can't complain. So I'm wondering where you want to begin our talk. What topics of interest do you have today?
I actually would like to put up something on the screen that you posted to your YouTube. You asked your audience, but I don't want to just remember it. I want to put it on the screen.
Sure.
Christians only accuse me of hate when my critique is towards Christianity or some of its followers. They generally thought I was lovely when I only criticized Islam. Do you think I'm a hateful person, or is it just a cope? And then there's a reference. I didn't look at the reference. Very few people said that you hate Muslims. That same number said you hate Christians. A little bit more said that you hate both. Almost everyone said you don't hate. And I was one of the people that said you don't hate. I found that interesting. One, that people are giving you this criticism. But the other reason I thought it's interesting is I think it's related to some of the other stuff I talk about and some big issues among ex-Muslims. I say punishment is evil. That's the same as saying, hate is wrong. What can you say about that? Like, why was this a thing you wanted to ask your audience about?
I think I was trying to get a feel for how the audience is thinking, because I have my perspective, and of course that's biased because it's my perspective. But I had seen an uptick in the amount of comments accusing me of being hateful towards Christians, which has never been a problem in the past. Like when I was just talking about Islam, nobody had accused me of being a hateful person towards Christianity or Christians. Sorry. I've gotten a lot of accusations, of course, from Muslims in the past saying you're just one of those hateful people, you're all the same, and so on and so forth. But I tried to not give it much, attention. And then as soon as I started to talk a little bit more about Christianity or platform people who were ex-Christians, then I started to get the same kind of accusations that, some Muslims would levy towards me. And I think it's more just I suppose, an emotional attachment to the identity of being a Muslim or a Christian and so on. And a lot of the stories that they hear about what a disbeliever is or what a critic is cement that idea that nobody would criticize this religion or see that it is not true unless they have bad motivations or unless there's hate in their heart or something or another. There's so many allegories for that, or, ways of putting it in these religions. And then they see someone like me and they think it's an example of what the books say or what the preachers say. So I was curious that, to me, it just proves that of course, I'm not perfect. I may say things that are, that my emotions have bled into and kind of biased what I'm saying from time to time. But I try to be impartial, and it was sort of proof for me that if I'm getting the same sort of accusations from both sides, it's more about them and not really about me. Have you gotten any similar sort of accusations from Muslims or Christians?
No, but I got something maybe similar to that, which was somebody had asked on my YouTube, why do you criticize Islam?
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird question. I just answered plainly, well, that's the one I know about. And it's not like if other religions do come up in what we talk about, I'm fine saying what I disagree with. I just don't have a lot to say because I don't know a lot about it. But I think it's a weird question to begin with because it seems like it's coming from a place of what you're kind of saying. These people who think, or they start questioning, even wondering, why are you criticizing Islam? Does that mean you're only against Islam? You know, it's just an assumption they're making, it seems like.
I think it's also a symptom of the like self-centeredness of each of these religions and their followers to some extent, which is a human trait, right? Like we like to think that everything that happens to us is unique or important or somehow more relevant than things that happen far away. So they believe the narratives that their religion is persecuted, especially, or particularly more than other religions. And that must be because of some nefarious reason or another. So yeah, the fact that Christians think that their religion is very persecuted and Muslims think that their religion is very persecuted, I think feeds into that narrative that you're the persecution. You're playing into that role. But yeah, there's not much you could do about that except keep doing what you're doing and demonstrate to them why they're wrong.
Yeah, you while you were talking, you reminded me of something basic. They're conflating legitimate criticism with insult, as if they are the same thing. And from what I understand, the way most people at least, when they use the term Islamophobia, I think they're doing the same thing. They're not seeing a difference between hate of people who claim to be Muslims and legitimate criticism of ideas that happen to be, part of the Quran or Hadith or whatever.
Yeah. And there's also like sensationalized, sort of simplified criticism of religion where someone would just point to, the verse 34, Surah An-Nisa, and say, see, this is proof that all Muslims think it's okay to beat their wives. And I've seen like Christian publications depict Muslim families as exclusively, as an angry man who beats up his wife and his children, and then they find Christ and then their lives get better. Simplistic narratives like that don't actually tell the full story. And then it makes it seem like the criticism is false when someone comes across, such a criticism and they have examples in their life of Muslims who don't behave that way. And they think, well, now I don't even know if I believe that this verse is correctly translated or that any of this, what you're saying, is true. So they discredit the, good criticism, the valid criticism, with simplistic narratives. So that's why it's hard to even stand behind a term like Islamophobia when usually, believers use it as a way to shield their religion from any criticism by accusing the person who's making that criticism of being hateful or fearful to a degree that is not justified or warranted. So I try to steer away from using that word one way or another altogether.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a lot of that going on everywhere. It's not just Muslims and ex-Muslims.
Yeah, I don't think Christians have a word that's like Christianophobia, but they do think, some of them, I guess, do think in the US that there's a war on Christmas, for example, or that there's a war on the Bible, and that by refusing to have the 10 Commandments in classrooms, you're oppressing them somehow. So they shift the goalposts, I suppose, of what is secularism and what is justified separation. What is their right to practice something versus their right to enforce it on others. So yeah, Christians do have a version of that. They just don't have a neat label like Christianophobia, like Muslims do.
There's another term that I think is used the same way, anti-Semitism. I think a lot of people, when they use the term, they're saying it in response to someone that's trying to give legitimate criticism of, let's say, Israel's actions. And then they're trying to say that it's just hate of Jews. Yeah, it seems like the same kind of thing. I don't know if it's exactly the same.
Not exactly, but it's sometimes, yeah, that accusations of anti-Semitism, or I suppose some people like to attribute any criticism of Zionism as a movement or Israel as a country to hatred of Jews, and just mix the two. And that what's complicated is often, not just sometimes, very often that can be the case. People who are anti-Israel are also anti-Semitic. But I think that just discounting any criticism about Israel or Zionism as just anti-Semitic is not fair or accurate. You can doubt certain people's motivations to highlight that issue in particular and not other issues, but you can't use that to discredit their criticism altogether. Someone can be both, anti-Semitic and also have valid points in their criticism of Israel. But also, you don't have to just listen to the anti-Semites. There are people who aren't anti-Semitic and have the same criticisms. So in a sense, it is used the same way to accuse anybody with negative opinions of being hateful on some level, even if they admit to not being hateful. So it's, to me, there's a parallel there between, that and how in Islam, the concept of a disbeliever is almost like a knowing disbeliever, someone who knows the truth and denies that it is the truth. Even if that person, like me, tells them, I don't believe Islam is true, they say, well, you believe deep down and you're denying it. So when you attribute, someone's intentions, when you claim to know what someone is thinking and claim that anybody who says otherwise is lying, there's no chance to have a discussion in a productive way at all. Or, if you just accuse anybody who disagrees with you of being dishonest, then what's the point of the conversation to begin with? It's just an easy way to get yourself out of thinking or talking.
I only recently learned about that, and it was from you in one of your live streams. That being, is it the term kaffir or is it a different term? I don't remember which term. Are we talking about the term kaffir? Okay. Yeah. I thought kaffir just meant somebody who left the religion. I didn't know it actually means somebody who's actually still a Muslim, but he's lying for whatever purpose. I don't know what purpose. I didn't know that. That was very interesting to learn about.
Well, I don't know if it still counts as still a Muslim, but in a sense and by the way, it's an umbrella term. So they can use kafir to mean someone who doesn't know very much about Islam, but doesn't believe it, or, follows a different religion that's non-Abrahamic. It's very versatile. But at the core, when they're talking about not the epistemological meaning, the etymology of the word kafir, it comes from kufr, like taghtiya, like covering up. So covering up the truth. And often the accusation is that person knows Islam is true, but denies it for one reason or another. Corruption of the soul, the devil, to chase earthly desires, whatever it might be. So it's not that they're saying you're Muslim but lying. It's that you know that Islam is true, but you're somehow being intellectually dishonest to avoid admitting that.
It's really weird. Do you think there's even one person that fits that label ever?
See, I used to say no, there's not even one person on earth in all of history that would fit that label. And then the more that I think about it, I think that's an impossible bar to reach, because there could be a person out there who thinks all sorts of irrational, insane things. So by virtue of having one example doesn't mean that is a typical case, or that is a category of people. The way that Islam deals with it, it's as if kuffar are like a large category that Allah dedicates a lot of time and attention and energy to in the Quran, to diss, to warn about, to threaten, all that kind of stuff. So if such a person does exist, there might be a few out there. They're in no way, large enough of a minority or a majority to warrant all that hateful rhetoric, in my opinion, in the Quran.
What do you think the motivation was to if Muhammad was the one who made the term, what do you think his motivation was to design the term that way instead of just saying somebody who doesn't believe in Islam anymore?
I can't speak about the motivations of Muhammad or the author of, or the authors of the Quran, because I can't say any of these things definitively, because it's, there's so much time separation between us and them. What I can speculate, though, is that it's a very useful concept, because if it's useful because it makes it seem as if the Islamic paradigm is fair. So if you didn't have that concept of a believing disbeliever, in a sense, or a person who knows the truth but is denying, then it would be very hard to think, of why all these kuffar deserve to go to hell. Because if it's just about not being convinced or being ignorant of the truth and so on, if it's actually, if you put into it the nuance that it deserves, which is that people arrive at their beliefs in many different ways, and it's never really about choosing a belief, but it's what you conclude is true, then Allah would have to be a lot more understanding about that and not take it so personally. But when you frame it as a conscious choice, an intentional choice to disbelieve, an intentional choice to disobey, then they're kind of a scapegoat. So it's a very convenient concept. So in a way, it's I don't know if I see a similar concept in Christianity. So if I were to ask, a Christian who believes that I would go to hell if I'm not saved by Jesus, what did I do to deserve that? They'd say, well, you gotta accept the message. You gotta accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior. If you don't, that's on you. It doesn't have the same sort of
I think I'm getting it.
effectiveness. What's that?
I think I get it.
Yeah. It's not as effective as blaming you and claiming that that Jesus is the truth, but you're denying it or something like that.
Yeah, on the one hand, if kaffir just meant somebody that left Islam, there's a default assigning of he did it for good reasons. And if you design it around, no, you know Islam is the truth, but you're going against it anyway for some other purpose, well, that other purpose sounds like evil. Like they're trying to say we're being evil by leaving Islam automatically. Like
Right.
There's no possibility of we actually believe we're doing the right thing and we think that is wrong. There's no room left for that possibility.
Yeah. And to be clear, that doesn't mean that every single Muslim thinks of every single kafir or non-Muslim that way. But often, people who are intimately familiar with the religion or used to be part of the religion or the community are accused of that the most. Like, I don't think that Muslims generally look at a Christian or a Hindu and say they know Islam is the truth, but they deny it. Some do, but generally not everybody thinks that way. But if they were to look at someone like me, they say, well, you seem to know a lot about Islam, or you seem to practice it if they believe that I did. Therefore, you must be denying it. There's no way somebody would know so much and still not believe that it's the truth. So we get that accusation more than the general public, as kuffar in general.
That's interesting. It kind of reminds me of something. So I live in the U.S. There's a lot of Christians around me. One time I was talking with a Christian. I was an atheist by this time. And we were talking about something about morality. And when they found out that I believe morality is objective, they're like, oh, okay, you're one step away from being a Christian. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Well, in his conception, the only way you can have objective morality is if there's a God that says it or whatever. But then I don't know why he thinks that would go to Christianity. Couldn't that be a different religion too? I don't know. I don't know. And of course, that never happened. This was like 10 years ago, and I didn't become a Christian. So I don't know. The other thing, I think I just lost my idea. I wonder if now my brain is not able to do more than 3 hours.
Yeah, I mean, you've been doing this live stream for a while. I'm not surprised. Yeah. I'm not surprised if you're losing your train of thought every now and then.
Yeah. I have a lot of notes here to remind us, but the thing I just had in my head is gone.
That's all right. It'll come back.
Yeah, maybe.
What you said about, why Christianity and not Islam, I have been encountering that question so often every time I come across one of these attempts at proving, either Islam or Christianity or some other, monotheistic idea of God. And they make it seem so self-evident and so logical and so like 1, 2, 3, 4. If you agree with me on this premise, then you also agree on that, and you also agree on that, and then eventually you're a Muslim, or eventually you're a Christian. But it's funny how like all of these steps are almost identical in all of these pitches, and and that's why I skip all of that first part when I'm having that discussion. It doesn't concern me so much. I start from the point of, let's assume there is a God. How do I know it's yours? Let's skip the whole like we need morality, we need a creator, and like the kalam argument and all that stuff, because at the end of the day it doesn't get us any closer to your religion. It gets us closer to the concept of God.
Oh, that's an interesting method. I haven't thought about that. It's like saying, okay, suppose I'm a deist, tell me why I should be a Muslim. You got to argue that, because what they do is the opposite. What I find a lot from Muslims is they will argue for why there should be a God, why it makes sense for there to be a God. Like I don't know, they'll say something like, they'll say a sentence like, something can't come from nothing. And then if I agree, if I was to agree that, okay, that means there's a God, they seem to be finished now. They don't seem to want to try to argue why there's this ginormous leap with 50,000 more claims about what that God is to take you to Islam. I never see them saying anything about that.
I mean, then it comes to the like weaker appeals to all sorts of things to make it seem like Islam is the only religion out here that claims all that, but also has these other characteristics which make it true. Like they'd say, well, the other religions, Christianity is not really monotheistic, it's polytheistic, and it's that whole discussion, and it can't be Christianity. Or that Islam is the only one with a preserved book and the other ones don't, so it can't be the other ones. Like, so they make up these criteria and characteristics, and they say that is what brings you to this one religion.
I see what you're saying. What they're doing is, okay, we have a menu of religions that you can pick from. And the menu is static. It cannot change. We cannot add new religions. At least today. That was a different story 2,000 years ago.
Right.
But today, you can't have any new religions.
That's a false prophet. That's obviously fake. Like if you add a new religion now, they'd say that's a false prophet, that's fake, that's a cult, that's not a religion, and so on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So in this menu of religions, they start refuting all the other ones. Here's what's wrong with Christianity. Here's what's wrong with Buddhism or whatever. And then what's left is Islam. Although I don't notice them actually putting any effort in looking for flaws in that. It's like they're just saying that's the default. They're just looking at the other ones. Here's my beef with that. Well, first of all, there's infinite possibilities for worldviews. A religion is a type of worldview. It's a type of worldview that makes a claim about that there exists some gods or whatever. Actually, I'm not even sure. I think Buddhism doesn't claim gods and it counts as a religion. I don't know. But the point is, there are worldviews that don't have a God claim in there. And there's more than one. And the point to say that is a lot of times when Muslims are engaging atheists in particular, they see atheism as a worldview, as if it's one unit, and if you refute that one unit, it's gone. I don't think they realize there's infinite possible worldviews that have atheism as part of it. Yeah, so I don't know what to do with that. There's so many different angles, and depending on which angle they're sitting at, even if they maybe could figure out that little angle, they're not seeing the other 5 angles.
Yeah, I think also the idea of atheism as a religion or a particular belief that says a particular thing is a flawed one. Or when they don't even again, and I don't necessarily blame the theists for that. I think a lot of people misunderstand or have different ideas about what atheism means. Because some atheists say, I'm an atheist, as in I say there is no God, there never was a God, and and all things can be explained in other ways, and so on and so forth. And then there's atheism in the sense that I think, and that is my what I subscribe to here, is the idea that I don't make any claims about gods. I think the word God and the idea of a God is a man-made concept. There has never been an expression of a God or the definition of God that came from anybody but man or woman, like, or a person. We don't have an independent idea of God that exists outside of the human mind. So I don't make claims about what it is or how it is that the earth came to exist. If there's any intention behind that, if there's intention behind our existence as humans, if there's design, I don't make any of those claims at all. I just reject the claim that there is, and that a particular religion speaks for that entity. Does that make sense? So I'm not saying there is no God. I'm saying even if there is a God, I don't believe that it has spoken to us in any of these religions, especially if the religion also includes this urgency to believe, otherwise the God will torture you or something of that sort. That the message is universal, yet somehow it hasn't managed to reach everybody. So it's more likely to me that every religion is just a human idea, and I don't make any claims about God. So a Muslim or a Christian trying to argue with me to prove that a God is necessary doesn't get me anywhere closer to their religion, because I could just skip all that and I say, let's assume there's a God. How do I get to your religion? And that's when they fail. And that's the interesting part for me.
Yeah. And well, one of the things they're doing, and I don't want to lump them all together, I'm sure some of them do it right. They try to refute your atheism by whatever conception they have of what atheism is, which is different than what you see. As an example, they'll say something like, "Oh, you're an atheist, therefore you're a materialist," and they have a definition of what materialism is. And by the way, that's even vague. You could say there's 10 definitions of what that is. And now you're, let's say, arguing about materialism or whatever, and let's say you end up agreeing with him about that materialism, and then he thinks, all right, now you're a Muslim, right? Obviously. But you could say there's millions of questions whose answers would make up the worldview. And every person has a different worldview. I don't think there's two people that have the same worldview. I mean, even if you just strip down atheism to just a position about God, even that has many variations. You gave one just now. Mine is a little bit different. But the same thing applies to Muslims, or the way we became Muslims and the way we left Islam. The way we became Muslims, it's not really all the same. Everyone's kind of different. Yeah, maybe we were born to it from our parents, but our parents told us different things. And we saw different things in our society. We went to different kind of schools, and those schools were saying different things. I mean, Quran schools. And then the way we left Islam is also all very different. There isn't one way that everyone left Islam. There's so many variations. I keep finding new ones, by the way. It's interesting. The different reasonings we have for why we disagree with Islam. It actually goes back to what Maryam was talking about a lot of, where we get homogenized. A single human being gets lumped in with a whole group, and supposedly now we all think the same. It's really weird. I don't understand it.
Yeah, I think it's human nature to want to simplify things so we can understand them better. Like to think that everybody from that tribe is dangerous to me, or everybody from that family is our enemy now. And so it's kind of the same thing, don't trust the Americans because so and so. It's just ways to simplify, to have shortcuts so we don't have to think too hard and have to deal with every case by case, because we need shortcuts in life sometimes. So I understand.
That's kind of like you're saying the shortcut itself is the label or the word that we give to a concept.
In a sense, yeah. And simplified associations and assuming the characteristics are shared in that whole group and so on.
Yeah, but there isn't a one-to-one relationship between words and concepts.
Yeah. We have to assume to some extent that there is some link to simplify our lives, I think. Otherwise,
Oh,
we'd have to be
there's
like Jordan Peterson and define every word all the time.
yeah. I'm against that. By the way, I'll clarify how I'm against it. Karl Popper explained. He's a philosopher. He explained, look, if you're going to start a discussion with arguing about a definition, then you're going all about it all wrong. You need to start a discussion by, here's the problem we have, how do we solve it? And in the middle of that, you may need to clarify a definition. So,
yeah.
I'm looking at my notes here.
Well, there's something that you said about how like we all left religion in different ways.
Yeah.
I have some thoughts on that because some people think, you know, that if you left Islam, you left it for the wrong reasons. And ironically, there's never a good reason to leave Islam to them, right? Like no reason you give is going to be good.
By the definition of kaffir, I guess.
Yeah. And sometimes they would give like reasons that make the person seem very shallow-minded or very materialistic or whatever. Like they'd accuse someone
I just want to get naked.
That, or you know, you left Islam to sin, or you left Islam for your partner, you know, your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. And I used to think when I first left Islam that the reasons I have for leaving were very thorough and very valid, and that people who have left, you know, for that they don't exist. And then I came across people who said, you know what, I just never really felt it or believed it or resonated with it. And then someday I decided I don't want to be a hijabi anymore, and I just left the whole religion because I realized none of it makes sense. And I used to, in the beginning, I used to think, wait, that's not a good reason for leaving. But then later I realized that's a bad way of thinking about things. There is no bad reason for abandoning an idea that was never proven to begin with. You can leave just because it's Tuesday or whatever, you know, like there's no bad reason. But some ways of leaving or some journeys out of faith might leave you vulnerable to another bad idea hijacking those weaknesses in the future. So I think still there's some work that you need to do. Like if you believed in a religion or an idea and then you abandoned it, that's not the end of the journey. You have to also, for your own benefit, try to understand what was it that made you vulnerable to the idea in the first place, how to make sure not to fall for something like that in the future or not to be vulnerable to it. So there's no bad reason for leaving Islam. But some reasons, or some ways that people leave Islam, if they don't put in the work, if they don't take their time to understand more things, they might fall prey to another idea that has the same, I don't know, common strengths, I suppose. So that's some thoughts I had about that. I still don't think there's a bad reason for leaving Islam.
Let's do an example. You mentioned emotional connection. I'll say something about myself. I didn't even know of that as a concept, to have an emotional connection with God. I only found out about it after I was already an atheist, that people thought that way. But yeah, if I was the person who had an emotional connection or wanted an emotional connection with God, and then I didn't have it, yeah, that would be a good reason to leave. And now for me, that's not why I was a Muslim. I was a Muslim, at least the last stage of Islam. Let's be clear for everybody, at least for people born to it, right? We're technically born atheists, depending on the definition of atheism.
Well, according to Islam, we're all born Muslim, but let's ignore that.
Yeah. When did we become Muslim? Like when the soul was breathed into us? Is that what it is? The third trimester?
Or everybody is born with the fitrah, the innate beliefs and the innate ideas, I suppose, that would have led us to Islam anyway. And that's according to the stories why some of these prophets were monotheistic even before receiving a message, because they were contemplating and they had the fitrah in them. So yeah, the Islamic idea is that everybody is born a Muslim with the fitrah of a monotheistic person till the parents corrupt them with, you know, the wrong religions in a sense. But if we're looking at it from a real point of view here, you know, detached from religions, yes, we're all born without any preconceived notions about religions and gods. So we might have some biases, I suppose, that are, there was a study about how like we might be genetically disposed to, biologically disposed to believe in a higher power, maybe. I don't know if I can refute that or if I don't know enough about that, but we don't have any bias towards any particular religions when we're born.
That's interesting. So I think my brain just did a reset. I had 3 ideas at the same time.
So you're saying we're born atheists, I suppose.
Oh yeah. I think the first reason, you can think of it as phases. Our first phase, for the people born to it, our first phase, if anyone could ask us, why are you a Muslim? Why do you believe in Islam? Our answer would be, well, my daddy told me. And that is our answer for a lot of things when we're like 4 years old. And then, later it's not that anymore. Later you have your own reasoning, and maybe you got that reasoning from your dad or someone else, but at least you can repeat the reasoning and you don't say, my daddy told me. And then you might realize that reasoning doesn't make sense and you still looking for reasoning to stay in Islam. So you find another one. My last reasoning for why I was a Muslim was, well, religion is to provide moral guidance. And then the reason I left Islam was I realized it does not provide good moral guidance. It actually makes your life worse. It tells you to do bad things. And my example was, well, and this is where there was a lot of confusion on my end, which is, I was born and raised in the U.S. I have 2 parents that are Muslims. One is Muslim now, the other one's not. But at the time, they were both Muslims. They come from a kind of liberal family. And where was I going with this? It's happening to me still. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. I'm having too many ideas at once.
Yeah, you got to start writing them down.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of things written down, and I haven't for this one. Yeah, I should have been. What was it?
Well, what's the next topic? Maybe we'll remember this one. We'll get back to it.
Yeah. I wonder if this is worth talking about. I noticed there's a litmus test that people have now in the ex-Muslim community, if that is a community. And I think it's broader than just the ex-Muslim community. I've heard people say, tell me what your position is on Israel-Palestine, and then I will tell you, what kind of person you are. And they're using that one issue as a litmus test. I find that interesting, how it's playing out in the real world of the ex-Muslim community and everywhere else. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
I don't know how good it is as a litmus test, because it depends what are you testing. It could be an indication of what sort of media you're consuming, or how you align politically, I suppose. Maybe you're more likely to have certain alignments. I think there's more to it than most people realize. I don't know what to say about that. It's a lot. It's a complicated topic.
Yeah. Well, for one thing, you can't, say things that are just like one word or one small sentence. Not enough information comes across, and that's not enough to, get your result for the litmus test. Yeah.
No, here's one thing I could say. Often bad conclusions, let's say, are not necessarily just a result of bad morals or the person having them, being a bad person. It could also be the biases and the incorrect information that they have that went in for the incorrect conclusions to come out. So sometimes we're quick to dismiss someone for having a bad opinion and thinking, well, that makes them a bad person. But if you were to go through the process of how they got there and how their life played out and what caused them to think that way, there's more to it than just that conclusion. So that's
Right.
not to defend a bad conclusion, but if you want to change that, you're better off trying to understand the steps that got them there than just debate the conclusion.
Yeah, for one thing, if you understand the steps that took them there, you can find a path for them to take steps to take them out of it.
Yeah.
And if you only hear the conclusion without the reasoning before it, I don't know how you would do that. Which, by the way, that reminds me of all the discussions that, not all of them, but some Muslims, when they're arguing with me about whatever, Islam or atheism, they're giving me criticisms about my ideas, supposedly, but I don't have any of those ideas. So they're not first asking me what my reasoning is and then trying to shoot down my reasoning. They're just assuming what my reasoning is based on some conclusions or litmus tests, and then providing an argument against this reasoning, which I don't even have. It's really weird.
I think it's kind of almost like figuring out some talking points or some key words that you hear in the other person's speech, and then based on that, you go off on a script that you're already trained to do, to follow. That, okay, if they say the word morality, then you say, well, there is objective morality and it's my religion, and so on and so forth. They're not actually engaging with the idea as much as they have trained themselves or been trained by watching, someone's content and so on, to think that if somebody says this word or this conclusion in an argument, this is the way to dismantle that, or this is the way to defeat them. That I don't think that's really effective. That's maybe effective at doing a demonstration for an audience and maybe seeming like you won an argument. But if you actually want to engage with their ideas, you don't just go off of a script that you've memorized before or that you've heard many times before.
Yeah, that reminds me of a Muslim once asked, he wanted to engage with me in the discussion, and they said, all right, first, before anything started, they said, first, tell me what your religion is. And I'm like, why do I need to do that? I thought you were going to argue things. Go ahead and argue. Why I got to tell you stuff first? The reason was he has a few scripts. For an atheist, he has one script. For a Christian, he has another script. For a Buddhist, I have another. You know what I mean? That's what he's doing there. That's interesting. Yeah.
Which, it's not just Muslims who are guilty of that. It's a lot of people are guilty of that way of simplistic arguing and thinking. And that is why I find debates tedious sometimes. But if I do find myself in a debate, that's not how I conduct myself. Like, even if I'm arguing with a Muslim on a live stream or something, I don't say, well, you're a Muslim, therefore you believe this and that, and explain to me this and that. And unless you do that, then you've lost the debate. Now, I want to know their position on every topic that we will discuss, instead of just going off on a script about how to debate a Muslim or, points to use against Islam or something.
Okay, that reminds me of what I wanted to say. Suppose somebody's litmus test was, are you a Muslim or an atheist? If you're a Muslim, I think this way about you. If you're an atheist, I think this way about you. I don't think that works because, first of all, there isn't one kind of Muslim. If they're going to assume, well, if you're Muslim, therefore you have these particular views. I was a Muslim. I didn't have those views. You know what I mean? There's as many Islams as there are Muslims that have ever lived. That's one way to look at it. Yeah. Maybe there's a little bit of doubling up. I don't know.
And there's a bit of value also. Like, that's not to say that Muslims are allowed to believe whatever they want with impunity without being questioned or criticized, because everyone has different beliefs. So sometimes there is some value in pointing out how some of their beliefs are not consistent with other parts of their belief system and how they're expected to believe other things. And like, maybe that'll get them to think critically about it. So sometimes there is value in pointing out the contradictions of their beliefs, but to just from the beginning go off on a script about how they should be believing this and they should be believing that, and then you start arguing against these things, it's not really productive for the conversation. So it also depends on what is the point of the conversation. What are you trying to achieve? Is the point to convince an audience that you have better talking points than the opposition? Or is the point to understand the opposition and try to change their mind? Or is it just to understand them and maybe try to change your mind? There's so many layers to it. How do you go about discussions? Like, what is your goal from a discussion with somebody who disagrees with you?
Yeah, well, I'll say what it isn't. The term debate, what people usually mean by that word is kind of like what happens in a court case with two lawyers, and each lawyer is on one side, and the lawyers never switch sides ever. They never argue the other side. I don't think that's what we should be doing. We should be trying to figure out what's true, and that means you gotta, as much as I'm arguing my side, I should be trying to argue the other guy's side and the infinite other sides that are also possible that are not currently in the discussion. That's the only way you're going to find things and get past your bias and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Is that also related to steelmanning in a way? So you try to present the opponent's position in the most accurate way or the best light possible so that you're engaging with that.
Yes, and more than that, even to then ask the other person, did I correctly, in your view, restate your view? Let them be the one that says, no, I don't think you understood my view. Although it's still possible that I understood their view, even though they disagreed that I did. But you still have to let them do that and push back and explain why. So steelmanning, I do think we should be steelmanning, being the opposite of strawmanning. But I think there is also could be a way you could do that wrong. You could steelman too much and really ruin this discussion that way too. You can go too far of trying to give them the benefit of the doubt of whatever their position is. I can't think of an example right now. If I think of one, I'll go ahead and try to say it. But can you think of an example now where steelmanning might go wrong if you go too far?
Yeah, although it wasn't in a discussion with the person, but when there was that debate or that weird performance between Jordan Peterson and 20 atheists or something on
I didn't watch it,
Jubilee.
I know what it's about.
Yeah. There were a lot of noteworthy moments where, like, I think Jordan Peterson wasn't engaging in good faith. And I would say some version of steelmanning would be some reviewers who would watch that video and then try to make Jordan Peterson's case on his behalf and try to express it in more words than he did and in clearer terms than he did, and to sort of assume what he meant to make it seem more coherent and then engage with that point. I think that would have been useful to do with Jordan Peterson present so that, he can learn how to articulate his points better and he can confirm that that's actually what he meant. But when other people do it on their behalf, that's not necessarily steelmanning as much as it's mutating it into a whole different talking point.
It's like giving excuses.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you steelman too far. Yeah. Now here's the thing. It's extremely hard to know whether you're steelmanning too much or not enough. And every case is going to be different. There's no hard rule you can follow.
I think I don't necessarily see a concern in my case of steelmanning too much with a person, because even if my steelmanning, my reiteration of what they said is actually improving their argument, and as long as they agree to it, as long as they're actually internalizing that, I can help them improve their argument. I'm still not worried that they're getting me any closer to their conclusion, because if they do, then it must be a good conclusion. If they don't, no amount of steelmanning will get me to that conclusion.
Yeah.
So I'm not too worried about that.
You remind me of something. On my Deconstructing Islam live stream recently, somebody was talking in the comments and at one point said that the reason we're not bringing him onto the call is because we're scared. It didn't even say what I'm scared of, but I know what he's saying that we're scared of. It's something like, I'm scared that he's going to look right to my audience, or I'm scared that I'm going to find out I'm wrong, or something like that. And here's the point. You just said it. We're not scared that we're going to find out we're wrong and then get on the right side of the truth. That sounds like an amazing thing, by the way. We see that as a very good thing. If I find out I'm wrong and then I change my mind to the right thing. So it's really weird to me that even people have that thought about us, that the reason we're not doing something because we're scared we're going to find out we're wrong.
I think it's also one of those shortcuts that people take to avoid thinking too hard about a topic, is assuming the other person's intentions or the weakness in their intellect and so on and so forth. So instead of assuming that everybody's operating with, in good faith till proven otherwise, they assume that everybody's operating in bad faith, and it's hard to prove otherwise. How do you prove to someone that you're not actually, scared of that scenario, or that you're not being too stubborn, unreasonably stubborn, or something like that? So it's easier for them to believe the unfalsifiable narrative that you have bad intentions or bad methodology, and that's why you believe what you believe.
Yeah, I don't know how to deal with that. I mean, maybe that might be one of the scenarios where you just don't talk to that person and you can't do anything. I mean, it's a little bit similar to you can't have a fruitful discussion with somebody who doesn't even want to have the discussion with you.
Yeah.
You can't
there
force
are
them to
discussions that aren't worth having. You can't talk to everybody and have every discussion ever. Sometimes it's worth ending it and calling it a day and finding a different person to discuss with.
And that signal on its own actually might be something that somebody can learn from. What I mean is, how do I say this?
Can I attempt to say it for you?
Yeah,
Tell me if I...
Go ahead.
Are you thinking something along the lines of how knowing when to end a conversation, is a skill, and not everybody has that skill?
Oh yeah, that's a huge skill, and I'm still always developing it. Yeah. On the
I
other
don't
side of
have
it,
that skill. Yeah.
You don't have that skill?
Sometimes I've had conversations go on for way too long because I'm just so interested in how the person thinks, but everyone watching the live stream is like, please kick that person off. We need to get to the next person. But my curiosity gets the best of me.
Yeah. Man, I wonder, my brain is gone. I think next time I'm only doing a 3-hour meeting.
Probably for the best. Yeah.
I had a thought, and then the thing you said was exactly my thought, and it's still lost. Oh no, what happened?
Oh, just had to fix something.
Say that last sentence again, and I think it'll remind me. Could you mind doing that?
So, yeah, you were thinking about ending a conversation when it's not worth continuing anymore, and how that is a skill.
Yeah.
And there's something to be learned there.
Oh yeah. So the criticism I usually get is on the other side of it, which is, what do they say? Oh yeah. Ex-Muslims sometimes tell me something like, "Don't waste your time talking with this person about so-and-so topic." And they say there's no point, but they don't know what my goals are. They're kind of assuming what my goals are. I think what they're thinking is that my goal is to, convince them. Well, yeah, if that was my goal, then that makes sense. I shouldn't do that. So, but in general, my goal isn't even that. It's, for one thing, it's to learn more about how they think. So I wouldn't mind conversing with them even more on this topic that really isn't going to go anywhere, because my goal is to help, learn more about how they think. That means let them talk more. I wonder how much that affects people. They don't have spelled out what their goals are for the discussion. I think you said this earlier. If you don't have a clear goal of what the purpose of the discussion is, it's going to go all over the place. And it's something that both people need to know what it is. And it doesn't have to be the exact same thing, obviously. It's not like we spent, it's not like we can spend a chunk of our discussion right before our real discussion just to discuss how we're going to discuss. We can't really do that.
Even when it's all over the place, I think sometimes there's some value to be learned from that, depending on, what that looks like exactly. But sometimes that in and of itself is information that you've just learned. we've just learned that this person, when discussing this particular topic, will jump all over the place and can't seem to keep a train of thought, or a train of argument. And that means something, that's information that's valuable to have. And I find that to be especially valuable when that person is usually regarded in other circles or in other contexts to be super intelligent and, presents their arguments very well and so on. But in the face of a discussion, they're all over the place. I think that is good information to have. So yeah, it depends on what the goal is of this, or not necessarily even the preconceived goal, but what the value is of this discussion, even after the fact.
Well, and you can have multiple goals for the same discussion, multiple layers. Yeah. And one of them might be, if you're doing a live stream, you want the audience to see what's happening. So the thing you just said of somebody going all over the place with, you're letting the audience see that. That's useful. Yeah.
And,
well, we don't have much time
people,
left.
The goal is, or the value is entertainment for their audience and just to make a fool out of the opponent. So if that's the goal, there are ways of achieving that too. But yeah, so choose your goals and your outcome, or the, I guess the, what you hope is the outcome of the conversation wisely, and try to operate within that is my advice, I suppose, for anyone.
And if you want, write it down for yourself to help you stick to your goal. And then also be kind to yourself if you didn't achieve it, or screwed something up, or talked more than you wanted to, or didn't talk enough, or there's a whole bunch. I
agree.
I'd love to talk to you a lot more about these kind of things. We don't have any more time right now, though.
Yeah, thank you for having me today, and good luck to you with the rest of the stream. I know it's been a long one already, but I believe in you. I know you can finish this.
All right, thank you. I need the support. All right, thanks, Apostate Aladdin.
See you around.